is about foresight.
Do I seem unduly concerned?
About anticipating your opponent's moves.
I will give you a final opportunity to reconsider.
It's about making sure you surprise them.
Don't think I'll show you any compassion.
And they don't surprise you.
I was really excited to do this film. First off, because I wanted to work with John Madden again. I was fascinated by the subject matter. I didn't really know how the political system works, and I wanted to understand what a lobbyist does. I knew that by taking on this role, I would learn a lot.
That one I see
Yeah.
more like
absolutely.
positive,
You know
right?
what? We could actually get a slightly bolder reading.
I didn't necessarily understand exactly what a lobbyist was, but when I read the log line of the script, it was immediately intriguing. The more I read, the more I began to realize this is one of those scripts that exercises a grip on you very quickly, and I found myself leaning forward in my seat.
When I take the stand, you'll see nothing but a granite wall.
I wanted to set something in the lobbying industry because we've seen movies about the politicians who are front and center giving speeches and posturing, but we haven't really seen an exploration of what goes on behind the scenes and who's controlling the politicians. It's all done behind closed doors. It's a slightly mysterious industry.
You think I don't know all this?
Does your membership? Because now would be a great time to tell them.
You're dealing in a world where everything is strategy. It's about the world of how you influence people, how you bring them around to your point of view, how you secure influence in various ways.
I was hired to win, and I have a responsibility to use whatever resource I have.
If I'm going to write a movie about the lobbying industry, I need an issue at the heart of it. And very methodically, I made a list of issues in kind of contemporary American politics. And the one that really leapt out was the issue of gun safety, mainly because it's tragically never far from the headlines and also least likely to change.
How the hell did she manage that?
Miss Sloane is a very complex, career-driven but conflicted lobbyist. DC is a town full of lobbyists. They do everything from working with clients to advocate on Capitol Hill for their point of view, both corporate and nonprofit.
A lobbyist is someone advocating for a cause, and they get you to vote for or against something.
What troubles me is the amount of influence you had.
They're engaged by different interested parties in persuading legislators to pass legislation that helps them out. And there are liberal lobbyists and conservative lobbyists. There are virtuous lobbyists and venal lobbyists, and they reflect the companies they work for. Some people think of it as a necessary evil. It's not always evil, but it seems to be always necessary, just the way things work in Washington.
Lobbying is not just working with the big companies or the big corporations. You're dealing with people's lives, basically, and trying to use legislation in the political process to make people's lives better. I think that was kind of eye-opening for a lot of members of the cast, that the stereotype isn't just corporate.
You want us to go again?
Yeah, right there. Oh, yes. Yeah.
We also did this boot camp in Toronto, which was a great way for the cast to sort of bond, but also just to ask all the stupid questions that we wanted to ask from a really experienced lobbyist.
One of the difficult things about DC is your personal and professional lives are intertwined. You would be on your phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You'd sleep with your phone under your pillow. How you'd interact with a member of Congress to how you'd interact with your colleagues, and kind of the career trajectory of a lobbyist, and how they go from the junior level to the Elizabeth Sloane level.
The gun lobby's rhetoric is based on the falsehood that we want to take something away from people. We don't. We want to make it more difficult for dangerous people to buy firearms. If we can't burst this fallacy, we may as well go home.
I talked to people about gun violence protection and gun safety and how someone would go about that if you were trying to push legislation. One woman had said to me, Washington is a contact sport, which I was like, what? I left the city really feeling like a completely different person from when I arrived.
In this town, no matter where you are, you're never more than 2 feet away from a rat.
In the film, we're dealing with an issue where there is countless casualties and fatalities and tragedy and pain that comes about as a result of firearms being misused. And there are incredibly high passions on both sides of that argument.
You're talking about the United States Constitution.
It takes on the issue of Second Amendment rights and measures that might or might not or should not be taken to stop guns getting into the wrong hands. That's a hugely contentious and divisive issue.
The Heaton-Harris bill that we talk about in the film is the idea of closing the loophole of background checks. It's not about taking people's guns away. It's about ensuring that people aren't getting killed unnecessarily because it's too easy to get hold of guns.
Stop her, you stop Heaton-Harris.
I want her to be the reason that people think twice before taking on the guardians of the Second Amendment.
The NRA. To some extent, perhaps they have a point, because it is about freedom to do something that's enshrined in the Constitution. And as every American knows, that Constitution is the bedrock of all the freedoms that they enjoy today. But obviously the opposition claim that the number of deaths that are being caused by the availability of guns, the ease of availability of guns, is just out of control. So trying to stem that flow is the uphill struggle.
What do you know about the gun lobby's opponents?
The Brady campaign?
I know they're going to lose because their total budget is less than what the gun lobby pays to get their shoes shined.
The arguments for and against are less important than how do we get it passed? How do we win? Lobbyists are a bunch of very competitive people driven by winning and losing.
She's in breach of Senate ethics rules.
Find another way.
In the movie, the gun lobby is very aggressive with their campaign financing. And I think for Liz, she likes that. She likes the idea of going up against a group that would think that they are too powerful to lose.
Let me remind you that perjury before Congress is a felony
The answer is no.
I think it's a culture of fear, people getting threats and intimidation.
If you decline, I can't stop them from blitzing you with negative finance.
Although there are the moral arguments to be made and there is that exploration as part of it, the morality of it is muddier than you first might suspect, and that Miss Sloane herself is morally muddier than you first understand. This happens on both sides.
I really liked the character of Miss Sloane because she's not a typical character that I would read in most screenplays. I found her incredibly intelligent and ambitious and compulsive in her desire to win. She is kind of a rebel and a maverick and a successful female lobbyist, a man's world.
Well, why don't I take a look at the numbers and then we will proceed from there.
The thing that impressed me most about Jessica is how much research she did. She actually read the same books that I read when I was preparing to write this script, which is incredibly impressive. She's immersed herself in that world.
Know your subject, people.
I couldn't have started this movie not doing the research that I had done. I really like to do research. I went to DC and I met with lobbyists, and I went to Capitol Hill and I read a bunch of books to try to understand just the world that Liz Sloane lives in.
Adam Blickstein, who was our sort of lieutenant outfit, who I was constantly on the phone with, checking this and that helped us in terms of where the story was going. It has been very invaluable.
Our role in the film was to help guide the filmmakers, the writers, the cast through what kind of the real-world DC side of it would be. John Madden is a details-oriented director, and he wanted to get it right.
Applauding, and you're going to walk straight past them there, pay no attention whatsoever.
And he got it right. It's a testament to the level of care and the level of concern about getting both the big picture and the minutia correct from a DC perspective. DC is a town with people passionate about issues and policy, and that's what drives a lot of people to be lobbyists. Ms. Sloane captures that multifaceted nature of the DC government affairs world accurately.
It reflects on what's going on in politics. It reflects very accurately on the world of lobbying and how these things actually happen.
The film is as authentic as any drama about the subject matter can be. You get a total sense of how these firms operate, what the types of characters are that populate those firms, how difficult it is to raise money, how slippery senators can be when you need them to do something for you. It's all in there.
I'm hoping that people will talk about how the public can still have guns, but maybe we can keep them out of the hands of some felons and criminals and terrorists.
The films pull back the curtain a little bit on how politics actually works and how in some cases it's counterintuitive to how you think things should work.
I think it's interesting to be part of a movie that really sort of takes the lid off that concept and shows it for what it is.
It was this whole new way of thinking about the American political system. That is what is so refreshing about this film.
It floats free of any actual world except the world of procedure. It's not my job to point fingers, it's my job to tell stories and to create an experience which, at its best, you would hope would make people think a little bit.
Cut. Cut there, thank you.
There's over 5 million of us, and we're armed.
There will only ever be one winner.
Who the hell does she think she is? You're just blowing this thing wide open.
And that's a wrap.